Charles Oliveira has done the virtually impossible task of becoming dangerous in every facet of the game. Hey, everybody, LauraSanko here, and it's time for UFC 280. Probably, possibly, definitely the most anticipated card of 2022, and we are now just days away. So I want to spend at least a couple of minutes here previewing the main event, which is, of course, Charles Oliveira taking on Islam Makhachev for the vacant lightweight strap. Of course, I'm doing that in air quotes because I think all of us probably feel like Charles Oliveira is still the champion, the weight miss, the scale issues, yada, yada, yada. I think probably we all feel like he's still the champion. Anyway, it's kind of a side point, but this card in particular is absolutely insane. And I know I say that every time I come on here. I get that. It's kind of my job to be a little bit of a hype woman and talk about the virtues of every card. But really, truly, when you look at the card for UFC 280, it is crazy to see. And the best way that I can put it into words is this is a card where every fight speaks for itself. You don't need to sell me. There don't need to be storylines outside of the octagon for these fights. Never mind the main event. Obviously, that's what we're all here for. That's what we're super excited about. And I'm going to pull up the card real quick. I mean, even starting with the featured bout of the prelims, you've got Mahmoud Muradov versus Kyle Bahalia, which is going to be crazy. You've got Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady. Those two guys are on incredible win streaks. That's a very important fight for the welterweight division. You've got Caitlin Chukagian versus Manon Fiorot kicking off the main card. Another super important fight in that division, especially for Manon Fiorot. If she gets past Caitlin Chukagian, I mean, you can only imagine she's going to be next in line probably to face Valentina. Beneil Dariush versus Mateusz Gamrot. Sign me up every day of the week for that one. I mean, Beneil is this close to be fighting for the championship. Then you've got Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley. Unreal matchup. Kind of a surprising one, but at the same time, one I like. And then, of course, you've got two title fights. Aljamain Sterling versus TJ Dillashaw. Aljamain defending his bantamweight title against the former two-time bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw, and then, as I said, the main event, Charles Oliveira. This card, I want to say it's stacked, but I say it every time. This is just a great card. It's the best card of the year so far. It might even beat the one that's coming up in December. But regardless, let's dig into it. And I want to talk in this video in particular about this main event, because as good as the card is, what we're here to see in particular is this main event between Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev. And before I kind of dive into each of them individually as fighters, I think that the intrigue around this fight is so multi-layered. As I said in the opening, the biggest thing is the stylistic matchup. We want to see how the best submission artist in the history of the UFC, Charles Oliveira, matches up with who many believe to be the toughest test in terms of wrestling outside Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is, of course, retired, and, of course, his protege, Islam Makhachev. Now, it's funny to me, it's interesting to me, I guess I should say, that Khabib is being brought up so much. I mean, I understand why. He is his coach. He is, as I said, Islam is his protege. They're best friends. Like, of course, he's going to get talked about. But it's almost as if Charles is fighting Khabib. Like, you definitely get the sense that if Charles is able to, well, honestly, regardless of how this shakes out, if I'm being honest, whether Charles wins against Islam, I think we're all going to sit there and go, oh, I bet he could have beaten Khabib. And if he loses, we're all going to sit there and go, oh, well, Khabib probably would have beat him. It's interesting. It's fascinating to me that Khabib's presence is such a cloud and a specter. I don't mean to make that sound negative, but like his influence is so intertwined in the way that we're talking about this fight. And to me, it's because, and I think I've used this phrase before, whether it's here or on the weigh-in show, there's a sense that he left a little bit on the table, that Khabib left a little bit untapped in terms of his talent, his potential. And so now it's like we're all wondering vicariously through Islam. And I guess I don't know that that's entirely accurate. And I don't know that it's entirely fair. I get why we're all doing it, and I'm doing it. I'm doing it subconsciously and somewhat consciously. But they are two different people, and they are two different fighters. And although they have obviously a great deal of similarities, there are enough differences where I think Islam enjoys having the responsibility of carrying Khabib's legacy, but there has to be a little part of him at times that is just like, can we just make this about me? I don't know. It's a fascinating dynamic coming into this one, and I think that we're going to talk about a lot as this week unfolds. But for this breakdown, I kind of wanted to do it a little bit differently. I'm trying to make these a little bit shorter and more digestible for you guys. But there are 100 preview shows out there, and there are guys that get really, really technical in the weeds. And I enjoyed doing that for you guys early on in what I was doing. It's difficult for me to get the film from the UFC in a timely manner in order to do that to the level that I want to do it. So for this one, I kind of wanted to go more along the line of like X factors that I think really stick out that potentially could play a role in this fight. So I'm just going to assume that that Charles Oliveira is a really good submission artist. I'm going to assume that that Islam Makhachev is a phenomenal wrestler a la Khabib. And let's just start on the basis of that. And I don't want to have to like belabor that point too much, because if you're watching my channel, you're probably a diehard and you probably know all the basics. So I guess what I want to focus on in terms of Charles, obviously he's on this incredible win streak, but what makes the win streak so special is not just the level of competition. And that's a very important one, because that's a big talking point when you look at his resume versus Islam's resume. There is a chasm of difference between those two things. Doesn't mean that Islam's not as good as a lot of people say he is. It just means that there are still questions that need to be answered. We have a lot of those questions answered with Charles Oliveira. In addition to that, what makes his winning streak so special is the fact that he is finishing guys. 10 of those 11 wins have been finishes. And the one that wasn't, Tony Ferguson, was a dominant performance against a very good wrestler. So along the way, Charles Oliveira's story started out very bumpy in the UFC. He was like 500 in the UFC at one point, 8-8, I think. And I think that we see him arriving at this moment, and because his story has been so twisty and windy and up and down, there's a different feeling about him when he arrives at these moments with these guys that seem virtually untouchable. And I think it's kind of unfair, because I think it's colored by the fact that we've seen him struggle. But we saw him struggle. It's almost like his career has two completely different components to it. I really do see it that way. The Charles Oliveira of today would demolish the Charles Oliveira of 5-6 years ago. Absolutely run right through him. And I think there are a lot of factors to that. I would love to sit down with him one day and just really pick his brain about what it was that did that. But the fight with Paul Felder was clearly a turning point. And then it was like he just continued to build skills, because he really was a one-dimensional fighter before that. He was a submission guy. He has become truly dangerous, not just good everywhere, not just a well-rounded fighter. He is a well-rounded fighter, but there are guys who are well-rounded, who are good everywhere, but they're maybe only dangerous one place. They might not even be dangerous anywhere. They're actually really good fighters who can make a strong career about being a good striker, a good grappler, a good wrestler, and good at blending all those things together. But they're not particularly dangerous or scary. Charles Oliveira has done the virtually impossible task of becoming dangerous in every facet of the game. He's dangerous at range. He's dangerous at boxing range. He's dangerous in the clinch. He's got decent wrestling that he has adapted to basically support his jujitsu. You know, he's not shooting blast double legs, but he's got the type of wrestling that suits his game so perfectly. And then, of course, the jujitsu, once it hits the mat, is truly history making, record breaking, something that we have never seen before in the history of this sport. So the guy has tools in every aspect. But then I think the thing that he has added, and this is the part where I don't fully understand where it's come from. And maybe it's just age and time because he started the sport so young, but it's a willingness to wade into the fire, finally finding a belief, whether it's in his chin, whether it's in his skill set, whatever it is, he is so willing to put himself in the line of fire or put himself in a dangerous grappling situation in order to survive it, get past it, and finish his opponent. He has the confidence to take a punch. He's got the confidence to be off of his back in a bad spot, whatever it is. He's now at a stage in his career where nothing scares him. And that is what makes him such a scary individual, is the fact that he has no fear of where a fight goes. And that is so crucial in this fight, because now I'm going to hop to Islam. Part of what makes Islam different than Khabib is the striking. He is a much more technical striker than Khabib. He's got a great kicking game. He's much more patient in general, but especially on the feet. Like Khabib, you knew he was going to shoot within, I don't know, however long the fight started. And there was just sort of a almost, I mean, it was urgency, but it was like, especially early, you could sense that he was so uncomfortable in striking situations that it was like his striking was just a means to an end. Islam is not like that. He is, of course, he's looking for the takedown. So I guess in that sense, his striking is also a means to an end, but he's willing to take his time with it. And he does a really good job of staying patient and composed, picking guys apart with, you know, teep kicks, head kicks, jabs. He does just enough, is what I'd say, in terms of the striking. And then he finds the perfect moment. He does a fantastic job of catching kicks. And it's not just that he has to like fully catch the kick and get a takedown off of it. Anytime he can even grab half an ankle and maybe his opponent is able to jerk their leg almost completely out for that split second where they're jerking their leg away and they're off balance and they're out of position, he will find a way to grab a leg, a knee, an ankle, a hip, a wrist, the, you know, half collar tie, whatever it is. The second he touches you, it's like, and that's when he turned into that. That's when you start to see the similarities with Khabib, because it's like, as soon as he touches you, it's just like quicksand. So when you talk about the striking of Islam, though, the fear of the takedown is a huge component of what makes his striking good. It's not sensational, but it's good. It's solid. It's very technical. But what really augments how technical it is the thought in all of his opponent's head that they're constantly having to calculate, is this a feint? Is this a level change, or is he really going to take me down now? And that constant calculation of when and how at what angle and how fast and how hard a takedown is coming causes his opponents to be a little bit gun shy and be a little bit hesitant. And the ones who aren't generally pay for it. Like when you watch the fight with Dan Hooker didn't play that game. He did not get hesitant. He wasn't worried. He was going to go out there and he was going to pressure Islam. And he did a really good job. The problem is, like I said, it took one little kick and Islam caught part of an ankle. He didn't even catch it flush. And then he had Dan in a position that Dan had no business being in and could not get out of. That has been the story of a lot, and I'm going to say all of Islam's fights, is that his striking is good because his wrestling is good, because his opponents have to fear the takedown. Charles Oliveira is not going to fear the takedown. I'm not saying he's going to go looking for it. I'm not saying he wants to end up on his back underneath Islam, but is it the worst thing in the world? No, it's not. And so Islam knows that. Charles knows that. And that changes the dynamic of the way that Islam approaches this fight. It does not change the dynamic of how Charles approaches this fight. And that to me is really interesting. We're going to learn so much about Islam Makhachev in this fight. It's going to be crazy because the fact is that as good as Islam has looked as of late, I mean, what he did to Bobby Green, what he did to Dan Hooker, those were virtually flawless performances. Thiago Moises, Drew Dober, all these finishes. My problem with that, not my problem with that, those are excellent wins. Those are really, really good wins. But we have to admit what they really are. And again, I'm not saying that I don't want the takeaway from this video to be, Laura thinks Charles Oliveira is going to win. I don't know. I genuinely don't. This matchup is truly a mystery to me. And anyone who, I guess that's my point, is anyone who feels strongly one way or the other, I think hasn't really done the research, because we really don't know. Unless you're on Islam's team or you're DC and you've seen this guy, I don't have the benefit of that. I'm watching film, I'm watching habits and tendencies, and I'm looking at what they've been able to do and against whom. And when you look at the last few fights, they've been phenomenal finishes. But Bobby Green took that fight very late notice. Dan Hooker took that fight 4 weeks, I think, after he had just fought. So not nearly a full camp either. Thiago Moises, that went 4 rounds. And Drew Dober, that went 3 rounds. And all props to every single one of those guys that I just mentioned. They're excellent fighters, but they are not on the level of Charles Oliveira, not even close. So resume matters. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have the skills. It just means that we still don't know, or at least I still don't know. Maybe the inner circle knows, but I still don't know. And I'm going to guess that you still don't know as a fan. One of the things that it's going to be very interesting to see is the way that Islam approaches the grappling components of this fight, because the fact is we've never seen this style, this freestyle Dagestani wrestling. We've never really seen it put to the test in the lightweight division at the highest level. And you're like, Laura, Khabib. I know that. He was 29-0. But even Khabib, he had a great resume, especially toward the end. He beat Gaethje, Poirier, McGregor, Gaethje, Poirier, McGregor, Iaquinta, Barboza, Johnson. Okay, that's me rattling off the last huge chunk of his career. Not one of those guys is anywhere near the submission threat that Charles Oliveira is. That's a fact. So as dominant as we have seen these Dagestani wrestlers be, the fact is we have not seen that wrestling put up against that level of submission threat. Because you know why? There is only one person who's that level of submission threat. And the guy who got closest for Islam is Thiago Moises. He's an excellent black belt, very, very good jiu-jitsu artist. And as I said, that went to the 4th round. And don't forget, Thiago took Islam down at one point. Now, it was just one takedown. And if I remember correctly, he got reversed fairly quickly. But it's not as if Thiago went out there and just got completely shellacked. It's not the case at all. And I think it's very fair to say that Thiago Moises and Charles Oliveira's submission abilities are not on the same level. As great as Thiago is, Charles Oliveira is the best to ever do it. So this fight to me means so much more than just the person Islam versus the person Charles Oliveira. This to me really is what's better, Dagestani wrestling or the highest level possible of Brazilian jiu-jitsu coupled with incredible striking. I don't know the answer to that, but I cannot wait to find out. I think that this is going to be an incredibly interesting fight to watch from a strategic perspective. It's already getting strategic. I think, when you watch what's been going on for the last couple of weeks with you know Islam's team saying, "Oh, we don't even know if Charles will make it." Of course, he has. He's out there now. He's in Abu Dhabi, I think he's been hanging out in Dubai as well. I mean, the man is walking lions. That's a guy who is comfortable in his surroundings, even though he's fighting in a part of the world that is going to be very pro Islam Makhachev. I mean, this fight may as well be in Dagestan, to be honest with you. Charles is walking into enemy territory and he's sauntering. He has no fear. And that, as I said before, that makes him an incredibly dangerous man. So not only does he not have fear about the striking, he doesn't have fear about the threat of the takedown. He doesn't have fear about the mind games that I think, not even mind games, but the way that a lot of both Khabib's and Islam's opponents have been broken before they've even stepped foot in the octagon with him. On the flip side of that, for I don't even know how long now, years now, but it's been slowly ramping up. We have had some of the sharpest minds in this sport saying over and over and over again, Islam Makhachev will be champion. Islam Makhachev is better than Khabib. He is as good as Khabib on the ground, a better striker, an overall more composed, better fight IQ. He is Khabib 2.0. When you think about those two things colliding in a UFC fight, in a main event for the belt for one of the marquee divisions in the best promotion in the world, there you have it, guys. Main event of UFC 280. Do not miss it. It goes down this weekend live from Abu Dhabi. I head out tomorrow and I can't wait. We'll see you there.